And I, besides all of you, would be ardent listeners here. Without any order of preference, ladies and gentlemen, let me have the pleasure of introducing our experts on stage and would request sirs to kindly take on the dais as I introduce them. Our first expert, ladies and gentlemen, of course, needs no introduction to most of you, but I'm doing that as a protocol. Lieutenant General Mohinder Puri, retired. Could we have a big round of applause? Lieutenant General was commissioned in 1966, and I can see a huge highlight that he has recently written a book, Kargil, Turning the Tide, which is considered a very, very highly expert book, and I would like to believe that he's called the Kargil hero as well, one of the Kargil heroes. So ladies and gentlemen, for General Mohinder Puri. The next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, looks more of an academician rather than a general, and what a combination it is. He's of course a PVSM and an AVSM, but the general officer is qualified on MBA, MSc Defense Studies, MPhil Defense Studies, MPhil Strategic Studies, PGDCA, and Diploma in Labor Law and Human Rights. I think the only thing missing is the PhD, which I'm sure will be added to his qualifications very soon. With a lot of pride and honor, I invite on stage for this wonderful discussion Lieutenant General KJ Singh, retired. And besides huge amount of medals that he has achieved in academics, right from the National Defense Academy's bronze medal, which is huge. Last but not the least, you've all heard him, one of the outstanding speakers of yesterday's sessions that we have had. But I would just take the honor of introducing the Husne family, the rarest distinction of having 10 military honors and awards to their credit, and the only son and father combination, ladies and gentlemen, in the Indian Defence Forces who have been awarded the Param Vashisht Sheva Medal by the President of India. Lieutenant General Syed Ata Husne, retired. Kargil, Turning the Tide. I would request the gentlemen to obviously have their ways of talking. Last 5-10 minutes could be question answers, but just requesting the audience to please put questions and not go into discussions, because the discussions are awarded to the experts on the dais. Sir.
Good morning, everybody. It's the third day, so like the pitch on the third day, there can be a lot of turn, the pitch is weathered, we've all been here. Let me start by paying a personal tribute to Khushwant Singh. I come from a district called as Ganganagar. So when I met Khushwant Singh, he told me, Ganganagar, the closest you can get to culture is agriculture, because Ganganagar is an agriculture district. But that man had such an influence on us. I used to, coming from Ganganagar, studying in a Sainik school, English was a challenge, and you had to learn English. So our English teacher devised a very wonderful method. What he would do is, he would assess our performance throughout the week. And those days there used to be a magazine called as Illustrated Weekly of India. You know, if you look back, Illustrated Weekly was a cover-all magazine. It was India Today, Outlook, Week, Frontline, all rolled into one at that time. There were just 3 magazines in India: India Today, Sports Weekly, and JS. That's all. So what he would do is, he'll assess our performance and he will go through that magazine, mark it somehow, and the one who performed the best on the Monday of the week, he used to give us a copy of that magazine. And to us, like, you know, this story is something like Eklavya and Dronacharya. Unseen, our shaping of our learning English was taking place by a guru like Khushwant Singh. Only thing, he was a very benign man. He made it so easy for us. When I learned about Sikh religion, I went through various books. The best were written by Khushwant Singh. And he was not a guru like I'm sorry, I'll make a little unparliamentary remark. He was not like Dronacharya. He wouldn't have asked us for our thumb. You know, when I met him first time, in Kasauli in early 80s, when I was officiating as ADC with Governor of Himachal, he literally offered us thumbs up. Because those days, it was a very popular drink also. So, he was a great man, and we learned a lot from him. Now, today's session is about a wonderful book called as Turning the Tide. See, India has this very sad tradition that we forget about our operations. We talk about them only when a thing like Udi strike or some literary fest takes place. So, about Kargil war, which is one of our wonderful wars India has fought, there have been various books, but two of them stand out. One written by Jal Ved Malik, From Surprise to Victory, and that is at a higher level. And second, at a more intimate and operational, tactical level, and culminating into strategic lessons, is one written by Jal Mohinder Puri. We can have a clap for him. Jal Puri is a Gurkha soldier. First time I met him was actually through a medium of letters again. My regiment was training here in Sabatu, training to go for CI operations. Those days, armored regiments were being put through an experiment like this, and my regiment was to go to aid under him at Henakot. I missed my date. I couldn't go. Kargil operation started, but when you miss a date, you want to find out about it in greater detail. So one ended up reading a lot of books on Kargil and his book also. Jalpuri has commanded a brigade in Akhnur. He is the one who got us the victory in Kargil. He was GOC of 8 days, and later he commanded 10 days. And second time when I met him, 10 corps. And second time when I met him, he was heading a very pioneering kind of technological thing called as ADG Taxi 3I. And he was also our military secretary. So we'll hear him shortly. But to steer the proceedings, we couldn't have asked for anybody better than Jal Atta Hasnan. You know him well. He's commanded a brigade in Udi, a division in Baramulla, a corps in Srinagar. He was also our MS. He is a scholar warrior. And when we come to these cultural festivals in salubrious climate, it's very easy to talk of culture. But he is one general who's applied culture in an environment where violence is the dominant narrative. In Kashmir, he discovered Kashmirian, Sufism, Jizana, Awam Sunwai, lot of concepts like this. He's actually applied culture in places where culture is not even taught. So over to Jal Atta Hasnan, who will steer us through these things.
Thank you, Jal KJ. Jai Hind. And a good morning to this very fine audience which has braved the early morning and managed to reach here by 10 o'clock, which is not too late. 30 minutes too late is not too late. We must clap for the audience too, yes. We've taken up a little bit of our time, and today's day is all about Jal Mohinder Puri, and it's all about Kargil. Kargil actually evokes a deep passion in most Indians, because it was the first war, if you remember, which came to your drawing room, and you could see what is happening there. You didn't see General Puri there, not too much of him, because let me tell you very clearly, General Puri is one of those soldiers who would like everyone else to be seen in front, and would never want to claim anything which he has done. He's one of those kind of soldiers who would give all the credit to everyone under him. And that is why I want to make sure that I speak the least and he speaks the most, because that is his day today. Now the format we'll follow, 30 seconds. The format we'll follow, I'm going to request him, like any good author, he must have evoked certain feelings at the time when he was about to undertake this job of writing this great book. What were the thoughts which came in his mind? The manner in which he approached his book, how did he put his book in sync with his experience of having commanded 8 Mountain Dip, one of our most famous divisions, let me tell you. 8 Mountain Dip, which came from the east, came into Sharifabad in the valley, and from there Janpuri took it all the way to Kargil. Not an easy job, breaking out from CI operations and going into a conventional operation. We want to hear it from him. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask him to take 5 minutes to just tell us what was in his mind when he started writing this book. And then I'll lead him on with a few questions. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank Rahul and Jennifer for giving me this platform to speak to you all regarding my book, Kargil, Turning the Tide. Now, as Atta has mentioned, in the next 5 to 7 minutes, I'll just give you a flavor of the book as to how it started. This is a personal account, my personal account of the 50-day war. And there is no secret, this is not a national secret, that we were totally surprised by the Pakistanis when they came and occupied these posts across the line of control. Now, by convention or by an informal understanding between the two armies, this gap of 40-50 kilometers was never, the posts were always vacated during the winters. And so also in the winter of 98, getting on to 99, the posts had been vacated. And the Pakistanis, in a grand plan authored by later President Musharraf, came and occupied these posts in full force. And the deepest aggression was about 8 to 10 kilometers inside our territory. So if you can imagine the type of problems which can be faced by any army, when the intrusions on a width of about 40 to 50 kilometers, and there are troops there occupying these areas, and the challenge was to now push these troops back and restore the sanctity of the line of control. The book basically talks about the Kashmir problem right from the partition, then gets on to the prelude to Kargil, which really started with the visit of our Prime Minister Vajpayee to Lahore and the Lahore summit, and thereafter I get on to the terrain on both sides of the border and how the Pakistanis used that time between the summit and the intrusion to get across the line of control, how they build up their forces, and then our response, and thereafter how matters unfolded. Now, I will just be briefly touching upon our response. Now, what are the challenges to the army at that time? This started about 6th of May, and this was the first information which came in the Batalic sector of some intrusions, some suspicious movement which was noticed. And the local there came and informed the local unit over there that this is some suspicious movement has been seen on some hilltops. So when the patrols went, they were fired upon, and that was the first indication we got that an intrusion had taken place. Now, I was on a lecture tour, and I came back on the 17th of May. And thereafter things started moving, though not with the speed at which we should have moved. It was only on about 25th or 26th of May that the first decision was taken to move my division from Sharifabad. Now, Sharifabad is a place which is en route to Gulbarg from Srinagar, and that is where the divisional headquarters was located. So the first indication, the first decision was that I should be moved to take over this area of Dras and Bashko by 1st of June. That's nearly 3 weeks into the operation, into what was first detected by us. And then thereafter, say about the 27th of May or 28th of May, I got a message that, sorry, you're not going to go ahead. And there's the 6th Mountain Division, which was the reserve formation also, which had been moved to Sonanda. They will be the ones who will be going in. So I said, okay, no problem. The next morning, I get a message from the Corps Commander. He rings me up early in the morning, and he said the Defense Minister, the Army Chief, the Army Commander are going to be in Srinagar, and I want you to be there at 7:30. Now this was about 6:30, and quickly we arranged a helicopter, and I landed at the helipad in Srinagar. And there we got into the helicopter and landed at a place called Mater, where the VIPs were being briefed by the local commanders. And General Malik, who was the chief, he took me aside and he said, now, I have decided that 8th Mountain Division will be given the task to evict the intruders from our area. Now, at that time, we were still calling them as intruders. We were not even talking about them as Pakistani soldiers who were infiltrated. So I said, okay, but I want to lay down 2 conditions. First is that there will be no pressure on me. I will be time. And second, that casualties are bound to occur. So please keep that in mind, that it's going to be a hard-fought operation. So he was very nice. He said, okay, no problems, you take over the responsibility on 1st of June. And on 1st of June was the area of responsibility given to me. And we took 10 to 12 days to build up for the first attack, which was a feature called tunneling. Now, tunneling had defied capture for 3 weeks till my division got inducted, but still I took 12 days to build up the artillery, build up the right type of forces, and then we attacked on the night of 12th, 13th June and captured tunneling on 13th morning, which was really the turning point of the Kargil war. And thereafter we went ridge hopping to the other location, and by then the ceasefire was declared and we pushed back the Pakistanis and restored the sanctity of the line of control. Now I'll leave it here and we'll have a question and answer session, and I do hope the rest of the portion of the book gets adequately covered. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that introductory note. I thought you touched upon some very, very interesting aspects here. But for this audience, I'm sure the question that must be coming to your mind immediately is, out of the blue, 10 years after the launch of operations by the Pakistan Army, the Pakistan Deep State, from 1989 till 1999, and the fact that last year Pervez Musharraf wrote this article where he said he had the Indian Army by its throat. What do you think, sir? If you could just explain very briefly, what was Pervez Musharraf's whole idea in launching this operation? Behind the back of his own Prime Minister and President, keeping the Air Force in the dark, what was the whole intention of launching this operation?
Can you hear me at the back? Yeah, I think, you know what Pervez Musharraf had said that he got us by the throat. I don't think it was anywhere near that. I mean, he's known for making such statements, and I'll let it pass. Now, what was his overall aim? I think tactically it was a brilliant operation which he had planned. Brilliant in the sense that he took us totally by surprise. He took the entire country by surprise, and the army included. So, from that point of view, I give him full credit. But I think he did not really get on to the end state of what the war would be when it terminates into a ceasefire or, you know, when the hostilities are called off. And that is his biggest mistake which he made, and we used that to our advantage. Now, what are the aims? His aim was internationalize the J&K problem. Over the years, 10 years, insurgency was at a high peak. in the Kashmir Valley, and we had brought it to a reasonably controlled situation. It was under control. The political process was on track, and he felt that they had lost their influence in the valley, and therefore he thought he'd open us another front to again bring back the international community's attention to this problem of J&K. And I think that was the main strategic aim of his. Also, if you see what the terrain is like, the ingressions were about 10 kilometers deep. That means, as far as Dras was concerned, he had interdicted the national highway. And he would have choked the national highway and stopped all movement to Leh on the national highway from Srinagar, Zojila, and thereafter on to Leh. We had an alternative access from Mandi and across the Rohtang Pass, but that was not in a state of, it was not at a stage where we could do the complete logistic support of the Leh garrison. So I think these were the two main points which he wanted to crash on.
Thank you, sir. You touched upon this very interesting issue of conflict initiation by the Pakistanis. And just as an observation for the audience also, just remember, the Pakistan Army is known to be the world's finest conflict initiator, but the worst terminator. They have never been able to terminate conflicts on their own terms. But you again raised a very interesting issue, sir, 10 kilometers intrusion. And for the audience and those who have never been orientated to ground in the army, let me just highlight to you 10 kilometers in the mountains, and that too at heights going up to 14, 15, 17,000 feet. 10 kilometers is the distance to Hajipir, virtually from Uri. And you can imagine the kind of surprise they achieved. They managed to come in there, and to evict them through 10 kilometers actually virtually requires a core-sized operation. That's the level to which the Indian Army had to go. But now to get back to one very interesting aspect. When you were called up that day and asked to undertake these operations, I'm sure you were aware that your division has a history of being one of the finest counterinsurgency forces of the world. Coming from the northeast, from Nagaland, coming to Sharifabad, 10 years you were there. How do you think a division with this history of being a counterinsurgency force could suddenly overnight take on the responsibility of undertaking conventional operations, that too against an entrenched enemy, that too at heights of 15 to 17,000?
Very interesting, Atta. About 6 months before this, the higher command force was visiting my division when I was in Sharifabad. And one of the officers, he posed a question to me, and he said, in case you have to, I was the command reserve. So in case you have to go into a war with Pakistan, how long will it take you to change track from counterinsurgency to conventional operation? So I said 6 months. Now here I was, after having made that statement, put into an operation within 2 weeks. And I think there were good reasons for that. Because firstly, the enemy was not as deeply entrenched as one would expect in a deliberate defense. He had come in hastily prepared defenses. The minefields, etc., obstacles which are normally laid were not well coordinated, and therefore we had that advantage. I used about a fortnight to change the mindset of the troops from counterinsurgency to conventional war. And all the battalion commanders and the brigade commanders they did a tremendous job in psychologically as well as tactically bringing them onto the grid as far as the conventional operations are concerned. Now the advantage which 8th Mounted Division had over others, it had been in insurgency for a very long time, and I think they were adequately blooded. So the initial response to enemy fire and all, they were quite used to it. It was a daily routine in 8th Mountain Division. And I think that was also an advantage which weighed in favor of 8th Mountain Division, besides it being the command reserve and being the first to be responding to a situation like that.
Sir, you did touch upon this aspect that we were surprised, completely surprised,
When I met a lot of Pakistanis, I always gave them this compliment, and the two armies do give each other a lot of compliments. The Indian army normally is better at giving compliments. I have always been telling the Pakistanis to really surprise us. But tell me, sir, in terms of the intelligence build-up thereafter, after being surprised, you couldn't have gone into thin air to attack and capture and evict. What was the kind of intelligence failure that we were looking at, and what was the intelligence build-up subsequently that you were faced with?
As far as military intelligence is concerned, their depth of seeing across the border is very limited. So you have to depend on the national intelligence agencies like the IB to give you internal intelligence of what's happening close to the border, the RAW to give you intelligence, external intelligence. No, none of these really were forthcoming. And when we went in, we were not even sure as to where the Pakistanis are. So it was only by deliberate patrolling, trying to establish contact with the enemy, that we finally were able to find out their location and how they were deployed on the ground. Now, intelligence was a failure. Like I said, it's no national secret that we were totally surprised. It was a failure of intelligence at all levels, whether it was military intelligence or whether it was the national intelligence.
Sir, we can imagine that it hides of that kind. When you have on a single peak, maybe 20, 30, 40 men, it's very, very difficult to discern where exactly they are. So, to explain to this audience, some of them who may not be fully orientated to the Indian Army's way of conduct of operations, I think it would be prudent that we explain how did you evolve your concept. I would particularly like you to emphasize on this aspect. We are always accused of being very attritional in our approach. And even the Pakistanis later on said, we were tired of shooting at the Indians, the way they managed to keep on crawling up. Do you think we were maneuverist enough, or do you think we were too attritionist in our approach?
No, once we got the information, we made our own plans, and there were a lot of people who were saying that frontal attacks are being. I don't think we ever launched a frontal attack unless it was tactically required, and it may have been a frontal attack which was launched. Otherwise, we were always using the laid down, approaches, that is the spurs and the ridge lines, to go and contact them and overcome their opposition. So, to an extent, I think it was more of maneuvering than of anything else. It was our use of firepower, it was our use of the ground, and basically I think it was the bravery of all the young officers and the men whom they were leading, which got us to success.
In fact, you virtually led me on to the next question, the whole aspect of leadership. And everyone says that this war was actually a war of the junior leader, the young officer, and we had a ratio of 1 officer to 12 dying in this war. That's not the kind of ratio you normally see in wars around the world. The Indian Army has a very high ratio of officer to men casualties. Now, what would you ascribe this to? What would be your opinion about the various levels of leadership? Let's start from the sub-tactical, the tactical, and the operational level.
At the lower level, should I say the troop commander level, we had junior commissioned officers. Some of them were brilliant. They were absolutely fearless leaders and who exhibited courage and bravery to a great degree. But some of them were in an older age group. And then to expect them to be operating at heights of 15 to 18,000 feet was not also very, they couldn't have performed to their utmost skill and their professionalism. The young officers, without exception, were brilliant. They displayed bravery, I think, which all Indians must be proud of. The amount of casualties which were suffered is something phenomenal, and I think it's nowhere in the history of warfare, and including mountain warfare, where such a high ratio of officer to man casualties were there. We had a very large number of young officers who sacrificed their lives to finally get onto the objective with their men. And I think that is something which this country must always remember, and must always be proud of. Coming on to the middle run, the leadership, I think that too was exceptional. No commanding officer was found wanting. There was just no way. You gave a task to a guy and he was more than forthcoming, provided he had the support and the advice. With the brigade commanders were there, experienced brigade commanders who were totally committed to the effort and to the overall aim of restoring the sanctity of the line of control. I think they too did a remarkable
Sir, if I can just interject one. Sir, you've also been MS later, sir. And Lata Aslan has also been MS. So it's very fashionable for us to say that as we are going along, the quality of leadership is suffering. The quality of officers which are coming in is getting degraded. Sir, you had the pleasure or the privilege to run a pilot, because closest we have got to conventional war is Kargil. And you saw such an awesome display of leadership by Manoj Pandey, Vijayan Thapar and the likes, Batra. So is there a merit in saying this, that the younger generation of leaders don't have it in them?
I think it's never say that in our time things were very good and today the leadership has come down to a much lower level. I totally disagree with that. Today we see the young leadership as enthusiastic, as courageous, as brave, and as performance oriented as the ones who were before them. The young leaders of Kargil today are commanding battalions. Some of them are commanding brigades. And I think they also see the same type of leadership, the exuberance which is there in these young officers. And I think we should, you see today the casualties which are taking place on the line of control or in counterinsurgency operations in Manipur or in J&K. It is the commitment of these young officers. I think it's more fashionable for people to say that, earlier leadership of young officers were very brave and very courageous, and today that leadership has got nothing of that sort. It is still the same, if not better.
Great, sir. I think a very, very pertinent question and very well answered. But very briefly, sir, since we don't have too much time and we have to give time to the audience also, but I think it will be prudent for us to also understand what were we up against. And there's no one better than you, because you had the grandstand view of this entire operation. How did the Pakistan Army appear to you? Their leadership, their capability, their systems. Do you think they were up to it? We were, of course, we defeated them ultimately, there's no doubt about it. But do you think the Pakistani Army was matching us in any way?
Well, obviously they didn't match us in any way. But I must say that wherever they put up opposition, stiff opposition, they were as good as any other army of the world. So it would be wrong to degrade their performance or relegate their performance to a very low level. Their soldiers are as brave or as good as any other soldier of the world armies. May not be as good as the Indian army, but definitely just a run below the Indian army, I would say. But they are very professional. The leadership is where they always have faulted. The young leadership may be good, but the middle, like I'll give you an example, that one of the guys who we captured, he came and told us कि साहब देखो आपके सीओ साहब ब्रिगेड कमांडर साहब तो यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं, हमारा सीओ साहब तो उस कांडू में है. So you can see the type of involvement of the command, how involved our command is to their, similarity in which you are asking.
Absolutely, sir. In fact, for our non-military friends, may I say that the orientation of officer commitment, the way it is in the Indian Army, one has had the benefit of seeing 42 armies around the world in the United Nations. Let me tell you, I don't think this kind of a commitment you can find anywhere. But let's take the level up a little higher. Sir, I think one of the most interesting aspects which emerged from Kargil, which is still being discussed, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee's decision that we will not cross the line of control. And we will restrict these operations to Kargil itself. What was the prudence of this decision, and how do you think it affected you?
Now, this was a political decision which was taken, and I think I mentioned in my book also that we did earn some brownie points from the West, say that we were a very mature democracy and things like that. But I'll tell you, as a field commander, what was my impression of that? We were pushing the Pakistanis back. We had the advantage over them, and we were giving them, giving them a run for their money. For what they had done, we were really bringing them to a totally defeatist state. And at that time, to be asking for a ceasefire, was not warranted at the tactical level. Now, I am sure there must have been some inputs which went at the national level to the political leaders. But from the tactical point of view, from the battle zone point of view, I was not appreciative of that at all, because the way we were maneuvering ourselves towards the line of control, if the war had continued for another 10 days, we would have suffered some more casualties, undoubtedly, but we would have been able to take a large number of their troops in the back before they could get back to a safe withdrawal.
So, you are actually responsible for getting these wars into our bedrooms, because Kargil is one war where media played a very prominent and good role. Maruf is here, but today his channel is at prime time, always in our bedroom. So how do you reflect on this?
Yeah, I think, see, when the war started, or when I'll take you on from 1st June onwards, when I went into the Gras Bashko sector, our policy was not clearly defined as far as the handling or dealing with the media. Sometimes we were allowing the media to come in, sometimes we were not allowing them to come in. So there was a lot of mixed information which was being transmitted until finally a media cell was created in Delhi at the army headquarters, headed by a major general, who then sort of liaised with the various media, and then that is how they finally came into the into the battle zone, and brought the battle to the drawing room of various people. This was, but we had to learn a lot of lessons from how the media performed at that time, how we performed, and what is our how do we deal with the media. Today everything is open. At that time it wasn't so open, and we had our initial problems of dealing with the media, but later on I think things had matured, and there was harmony between both the sides, and whatever they wanted to show, we allowed them to take the pictures. And if you recall the Battle of Tiger Hill, before the Chief of the Army Staff came to before the information passed to him that we are tackling Tiger Hill, the artillery was being fired on Tiger Hill, and that's how he rang up to find out कि क्या हो रहा है Tiger Hill के ऊपर. So that is the type of freedom which we gave to the media to do what they like.
Jal Puri said that just in jest, Jalpuri said that media got to our drawing room. Today it has got to our bedroom. That is the basic worry. But regardless, we have to roll on. May I also ask you one more question, sir? That's about use of air power. That how was air power, how much, and then what role it played? Should we have used them better?
Since we are short of time, can I just substantiate that question so that Jalpuri can take this on together? You see, this is considered to be largely an infantryman's battle. But you know that in the army, and particularly in the Indian army, you can never have a single arm as the predominant arm. This was an all-arms. This was every soldier of the Indian army who was involved in this, every arm. So to that extent, gunners who are sitting here, I'm sure they would love to hear from the general, how much did gunnery contribute to his success. The Bofors gun, they say, came to the rescue of the Indian Army in Kargil. And other equipment, other arms, if you would like to say something, the contribution of all of them along with the Air Force.
Yeah, let's start with the army first. I think, I had some experience as a young officer on the line of control of the use of direct firing artillery. We had the 130 mm medium guns, which we used to lay onto the enemy posts way back in the 70s. Now, I thought this was a good concept to be used, and I asked the GOC corps commander if he could send me one of the old guns and we could use it in the direct firing role. So he sent that gun, but it didn't, we couldn't even push it up a slope. So that didn't take off. And then my CRT, General Lakwinder Singh, brigadier at that time, he said, so let's try with the Bofors. So we tried with the Bofors, a direct firing of the Bofors onto the target. And I think it was a superb weapon, and all credit goes to the artillery for giving that support, close support. And I, in fact, have mentioned in the book, and at times this Bofors gun became more of an infantry support weapon, where a JCO would call for a fire onto a target. And there were many times when the JCO was just about 50 yards away from a bunker of the enemy, and he called for the fire, and pinpoint destruction of the target took place by this Bofors. I think it was a exemplary performance by the commander, and undoubtedly a very pleasant one. The rest, engineers did their bit, the logistics did their bit, full marks to them. Now coming to the Air Force, I don't want to get into a issue manner with the Air Force. They did a brilliant job as far as their own tactical concepts were concerned. But you must see, in a war of this nature, in a war which we were fighting at altitudes of 15 to 18,000 feet, like we were initially shell-shocked. They too were perhaps shell-shocked, and they could not exploit their weaponry to the extent which they would have liked to. And secondly, the restriction of crossing the line of control was another big restriction which did not allow them to fully use their weaponry to advantage. And all our attacks were by night, and they couldn't have been any support from the air at night. But what the Air Force did for us, they boosted the morale of the ground troops phenomenally, and they degraded the morale of the enemy. I think that is a very, very important contribution of theirs to the overall effort in Kashmir.
Well, on that note, I think we've run out of time, and I'm sure there are lots of people who would like to query. But my request to the audience is, please, just remember what I had said right at the beginning. It is General Puri's time, and not our time. What we need to do is put a crisp question to him and expect a response instead of a full commentary. Sir, yes.
General Puri, my compliments for an excellent book, which I have read. Two quick questions. In your book, you state that we knew that when we had victory, who led us to victory. But then you say that if we did not win, the blame would lie elsewhere. Would that be limited to the military leadership, or would it go up to the political leadership of the time? Particularly in light of the fact that the administration of the day was the one that vilified the Bofors gun. The country knows about that. Second is the remark that you made that was the time for us, that is India, to have tested the nuclear resolve of Pakistan. So could you please elaborate on these two?
Yeah, I'll take the second question first. I had at that stage also mentioned, and later on in a couple of my talks with the media, interaction with the media, I'd also mentioned that we should have called the nuclear bluff of Pakistan. I think we should not think that Pakistan is a rogue state to the extent that they just press the button without any, without any thought. So it's very difficult to get into a nuclear sort of an environment or a nuclear conflict with anyone in today's world. Nobody will allow that, and I don't think any country would be foolish enough to do it. And to that extent, I think we should have called the nuclear bluff. I'm glad they've done it now, and you see the results of this in years to come, or whenever the opportunity does come. Now, your question about the success having gone to people who were. What I was trying to say was that the success definitely should go to the young officers, the middle young officers, the brigade commanders who fought with the tenacity and with the commitment. Now, if things had gone wrong, I was only basically talking from the military point of view, because politicians never blame themselves, neither is blame ever given to them. So, as far as the people whose head would have been chopped off, I am very sure that mine would have been the first on the chopping block.
So may I so I visited General Puri at the headquarters, and this is not a question, this is a statement for all of you. His Colonel GS was giving me a rough time, saying, who are you, where have you come from, and suddenly he stuck his head in and said, hello Kunal, and if you know the GOC, it changes the whole situation. He was in a tracksuit. I've never seen a cooler man under fire, and it was really something else to see General Puri in his headquarters during the war. It could have been any day, absolutely unflappable. Generally, it was a privilege to be there.
Thank you for that.
Let me qualify what you said, Kunal. In my service, I would always say, in fact, this should have been really my concluding remark, to say that if ever I had to go to war even today, I would only seek a superior of the type of General Puri. I always wish to go to war with.
Thank you.
My congratulations to you for your great achievements, General Puri. My congratulations to you for your achievements, General Puri. My question is, how far we can tolerate all this lacking our military intelligence? All the ways we find that our military intelligence has failed. And you mentioned in that the villages came, and from them you came to know that there's an infiltration bureau. And like I stay in Amritsar, all these things, like recently we were asked all location of these villages, say from 10 kilometers inside. What is this happening in this country? I don't understand that. Would you please throw some light on this? How can we improve our military intelligence?
I tell you, I wanted to just restrict it to the book, and I am not very much up with what is happening in the contemporary times as far as the intelligence is concerned. But my information, whatever comes out in the media, is that intelligence is advanced to a very, very good state, and I don't think we should be overly worried about what is happening in the country as far as the intelligence is concerned. But let's just stick to the book. Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Okay, yes.
So in hindsight, do you think that the code for embedded journalists during the Kargil war?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'll just.
So in hindsight, do you think that the code for embedded journalists during the Kargil war should have been more strictly enforced?
Sorry?
I said the code for embedded journalists during the Kargil war should have been more strictly enforced.
Yeah, I think I get the flavor of your question, but if you see the Americans, they do restrict their use of the media when it comes to very, very critical and sensitive issues. And I think there is time, and I believe there was a proposal also which was mooted to say that within the operational, when the operational constraints or within the operations which are taking place, the media should be totally restricted. But I really, this is a policy decision which I have no comments to offer on that.
My question is that, you mentioned that the bunkers during the winter months were empty, we withdrew, and they came in during that time. Have we taken steps to see that it doesn't break in Kargil?
100%. 100% a Kargil will, to the best of my knowledge and experience, I don't think a Kargil can recover in JNK ever. Because they are in such close proximity to each other that it's doubtful operation of that magnitude will again occur.
Place, the General Panag was the commander of 192 Brigade there later on.
Let me start by first complimenting
Jalal Puri on an excellent book. Secondly, I've known Jalal Puri for a long, long time. When I was a captain and he was also a captain going to staff college, he came to umpire on our unit once in exercise Jhatka sometime in 1975. And I had very interesting interaction with him, and I saw in him as a very, very, very professional, relatively senior officer to me. Subsequently, of course, I never served with him, but one heard of his exploits. When after the Kargil War, in which, of course, it was General Vinder Puri's show, I would say his conduct was absolutely professional and one of the coolest men in the crisis, General Puri. But more than that, it is my experience with him as commander of 192 Mountain Brigade, the Battalion Brigade after the war. Something about which Kunal has also written in another book. I briefly met him when I was coming back from the landed at Leh airport. I had served in the Dark before. So 5-6 minutes we spent together, and he mentioned that you were going to a difficult sector and so on. I said, sir, after 1 week we will tackle. But before 1 week was over, we had a visit by the army commander, General Khanna, and there was a particular feature which, and let me share with you, there are no secrets. It was well inside Pakistan, a .5310. During the war, our patrols had gone there, but subsequently they withdrew back because they couldn't sustain themselves in the winters. They withdrew in the month of October, November 99. Now, this feature was there and Pakistanis were building up there. We were not certain whether they occupied it or not. General Khanna asked me, says, can that feature be taken? I said, yes, it can be taken. So he joked with me. He said, you are from the mechanized forces. You just landed up here 4 days ago. How confident are you? I reminded him that I am an old infantry officer and I know this terrain and we'll do it. Anyway, after the general had gone, I had a little chat with General Puri. He said, okay, you think you can do it? I said, sir, we'll do it. Don't worry. Thereafter, he left it to me. I must tell you, he didn't interfere. His benign presence was there. He always asked me a lot of questions about how the training was going on. But came the month of April, and that's the question, though he mentioned it can't be done, but he was also responsible for doing a reverse target. In the month of April, 7th of April to be precise, we launched the operation. It was 2 kilometers deep. We had to traverse a glacier. The altitude was 17,700, 800 feet. 14-6 was the unit. Descended using a boom from a cliff, traversed the glacier. We lost 2 men, 1 man, 1 JCO, and 1 boy was wounded. We were not certain he was on top or not. We had made all preparations. And before he could say, Jack Robinson, you were right on top of 5310. And today, 5310 controls close to 12 to 15 square kilometers of territory because of his unique position in a kind of a bowl. Why I highlighted this was that General Puri was equally capable during Kargil had he been given the permission to launch operations across, and he would have made the whole Kargil operation much simpler and with a larger number of enemy under our back. But I want to recount this because I had seen it. He did not interfere with me. He gave me full freedom as a brigade commander and allowed me to do what we could do. And we gave full freedom to our subordinates, 14 seats, who did wonderfully well. Sir, thanks to you, we learned a lot and we performed. Thanks,
We can still take 1 or 2 questions if there are. Sir.
I don't know if it's in your book, but I'm curious to know how the conflict ended and what role the Americans played in the end of the conflict.
See, the conflict ended with a ceasefire, and we restored the sanctity of the line of control. Now, as far as the Americans are concerned, I think it is also misplaced information that the Americans pressurized to Pakistan to an extent that they accepted the ceasefire. Now, if you see chronologically the sequence of events, there's a feature which is called Tiger Hill. Now, we attacked Tiger Hill on 4th, 5th July. And Nawaz Sharif went there the day Tiger Hill had fallen. So it was after the fall of Tiger Hill when he knew that there is nothing left for his army. So once you had Tiger Hill, I mean, if ceasefire had not been accepted, the army would have died. And a large number of them would have been unalive. So I think the Americans must have put pressure, but the total credibility to the Americans for having forced Pakistan to accept this ceasefire, I think may be a bit misplaced.
I think your last question, we had someone's hand going up there. Yes.
Sir, it is very well to say that we lost the surprise and that we were surprised by Pakistan. My question is that also that the credit to Pakistan to achieve the surprise by them. And I'm sure they would have kept the area for a long period of time under their observation, because this operation, this crossing the line of control so deep, would not have taken place only in this particular period in 1998. So, when we withdraw, or we don't say abandon, or rather vacate these posts, we have certainly failed, as per the normal military teaching and learning, that those areas are supposed to be kept under surveillance, even after vacating or abandoning and withdrawing, of course, is not the correct word. But after vacating, those posts, as per the teaching, have to be kept under surveillance. So the credit of achieving surprise goes to Pakistan, and letting out this surprise is definitely to the discredit of our own people. That's my question.
Yeah, I think if you heard me, I said it was a brilliantly conceived operation by the Pakistanis, which takes into account the surprise factor which they managed to put on us. So from that point of view, there's no two opinions on that they did surprise us. Now, as far as our bit is concerned, yeah, everyone is saying that it is our fault. I mean, why keep rubbing it in? The whole army said, yes, it's our fault. That ground level patrolling was not done, the SOPs which were laid down and not been adhered to. So these are lessons learned. And today we are in a much, much better situation than what we were at that point of time. Our surveillance having improved, our responses to such events having improved. So I don't think there's any cause of worry as far as that's concerned.
Thank you, sir. I think that brings us to the end of the thing. Let me just briefly sum up one last aspect. General Puri did allude to this aspect of a Kargil 2. And let me tell you, from 1999, I was the Colonel GS of Victor Force at that time. And I remember we were only seeking where will the next Kargil 2 come. The Indian Army was so besotted with this entire thing that there will be a Kargil 2. And as late as 2013, when something was happening in the area of Keren, North Kashmir, once again this whole problem came up. The media, those who don't know the ground, will always feel that there is some place where some action is taking place is a possible Kargil 2. I can assure you today, a Kargil 2 cannot take place. I wish to tell you this. The Indian Army is gone far beyond that stage today to ever allow a Kargil 2 to take place. Lastly, you've seen the type of army that belongs to you. It's that kind of an army which throws up an officer such as this. I think all is left for us to do is to give him not a sitting one, but a standing.
And ladies and gentlemen, this session has been dedicated to the Military Lit Fest as a part of the Khushwant Singh's Literature Festival. Thank you, Generals. Thank you very much. And what we call it, General Puri, you have left behind a legacy. This is called leaving behind a legacy. This is the honor for the entire life that you have served and made Indians very safe and happy. Thank you very much. And please do read the book. I mean, it's available in the bookstore. You could pick it up, have it autographed. So, General Puri, thank you very much. General Husne, as always, very prolific in speaking. And thank you very much, General Singh. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. I mean, don't move around as we quickly move into the next session, which, as I had announced yesterday, was supposed to be in the evening yesterday. This session ladies and gentlemen, is on Ambedkar, and may I very quickly invite the speakers on stage. Mr. Weiss alone, wherever you are, could you quickly come on the dais as we do not want to waste any more time. Badri Narayan and Dr. Anand Teltumne. An enlightened Ambedkar, it's going to absolutely move into crossing the barriers of caste, celebrating 125 years of Baba Sahib Ambedkar and of course the father of the Indian Constitution. Sirs, please take your dais. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated at the back. Can we all be seated, please, and maintain the protocol and take it forward? Thank you. Before we begin, ladies and gentlemen, could we have your attention back so that the speakers on stage are given the equal amount of importance and attention. All of them on stage, ladies and gentlemen, are prolific masters of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Dalit issues, they are journalists, they are professors, teachers, and of course researchers, have immense amount of books. So I don't want to get into their detailed protocols. Would like to have the discussions. Mr. Weiss known, Badri Narayan, and Dr. Anand Teltumne as the moderator and the speaker. Over to you, sir. Let's begin. An enlightened Ambedkar, 125 years, crossing the barriers of Dalits and the caste system, which is huge in India. Let's talk about it, think about it, reflect on it, the untold stories.
Good morning. We had a very interesting session before. Occasionally India has won many wars with outsiders, but this war against our internal enemy called caste, which Baba Sahib Ambedkar had dedicated himself, still remains unwon. In our school days, we used to hear, they used to call, whenever Mahatma Gandhi's name was uttered, that time it was called that Majburi ka naam Mahatma Gandhi. Probably Baba Sahib Ambedkar has displaced Gandhi these days and he became a Majburi ka naam. It's a very big challenge for us to compress such an ocean into a droplet within something like, what is the time? 30 minutes? Yeah. So, three of us and 30 minutes is a really challenge. I would just sketch out before I invite my co-panelists to talk on their respective topics, and there are a lot much to say. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, is a multifaceted personality. He started off something like, you just gauge it and it could be something like very unimaginable that such a person walked on the earth. The kind of educational accomplishment that he did, coming from such a kind of background and actually accomplishing something like 2 doctorates from the world-renowned universities, and then plunging into giving up all the kinds of things and plunging into the public life and struggle on the road. It's not, Baba Sahib Ambedkar was not great-minded, he was not great to start with. When he died in 1956, for up to 10 years there was not a single monument even to his name. All of a sudden, actually his son had to go from Mahu, where he was born, and walk up to Bombay collecting coins from people to erect the monument that stands at this, what is called now Chaitya Bhumi, where 2 million people congregate every year, and it actually grows every year. So that is the kind of greatness. So we have to remember, this man had started, there was not an iota of evidence that he would be actually coming into public life when he was student in Columbia and London School of Economics. But with kind of doctoral degree in economics in Columbia, not many people from India actually had it. When he went to Baroda State, according to the terms of his scholarship, and faced the music of caste, even the peons of his own department would throw the files to his table as a secretary or military secretary of the Baroda state. So this is the kind of thing. He would be thrown out on the road where he actually lived in incognito in a Parsi called not even Hindu. The Parsis actually drove him out onto the street. We can imagine. And moreover, it is normally said that Ambedkar was Dalit and he came from poor background, etc. It's not true. He belonged to a Mahar aristocracy where 2 generations his forefathers were actually serving in a British military from mother's side as well as father's side. So this is the kind of background that he had and had to face this kind of ignominy of caste, and that actually impelled him to come to public life and take out the struggle onto the road. And he started the struggle. First significant struggle that he started was at Mahad, just for drinking water. It was not meant for that. It was incidental that they were to walk to the Saudar tank and actually, which was forbidden to them, and they would draw water. And in that, the delegates who were the veterans of the First World War were beaten by the Orthodox Hindus. It was just Ambedkar's word that they came quiet. But the things actually went on into the legal tangle, etc. And Ambedkar, who had a modest hope that the advanced elements of Hindu society would come forward to take up reforms, they were all belied, and he turned his side to politics, which had already taken a communal turn. And he started threatening about a conversion. Lastly, he did it. He did converting himself to Buddhism along with the lakhs of his followers. But initially started off, there was no again indication that he would actually be converting to Buddhism. In 1936, actually, when he explained his motive to convert or renounce Hinduism and convert to some other religion, that time he said that we should be converting to such a religion of which the community exists in India, so that we can merge and actually get over to the kind of weaknesses that we had. But ultimately he converted to Buddhism. All these, if you take a glance at his life, this is actually he went on evolving. Actually so many things have happened, and he formed, in the wake of the India Act 1935, the elections were to happen, and he formed India Independent Labour Party. He had a lot of influences actually from his Columbia professors who were the front rankers kind of thing, the philosophers of pragmatism and Fabian socialism. Pragmatism actually provided the methodological source to Ambedkar thereafter, because in 1953, when he went to Columbia to get his honorary degree of LLD, that time he had written to his wife and said that he owed entire intellectual life to his Professor John Dewey. So that kind of influence he carried, and an ideological kind of vision that he enacted thereafter in life actually came from Fabian socialism. So this kind of influences remained on Ambedkar all through, and he had formed the Independent Labour Party, which was actually a Fabian party in London those days. This was veritably a first left party, because Communist Party had been formed in India, but it was actually living under the shadow of Congress, the Congress Socialist Party. And thereafter the Cripps Mission came, etc. So this is, I'm actually just rushing through the milestone. Cripps Mission came, which Indian politics had hugely communalized, and he did not see the scope for this kind of class politics, and had to turn to so-called caste politics, forming Scheduled Caste Federation, which remained until he died. He went to, simultaneously when he formed Scheduled Caste Federation, he had gone to Viceroy Executive Council as a labor member, and he did many kinds of reforms in labor laws, etc. and the kind of policy, the national water policy, the electrical policy, and all those kinds of things actually are his contributions. But when Viceroy Executive Council was dissolved in the wake of cabinet mission in 1946, and he had to come out, and that the Viceroy's Executive Council was constituted as the independent India's meaning government of India's government. Thereafter, Ambedkar was again nobody. So entire political class actually played against him, and there was nobody. He was reduced to nobody. When Constituent Assembly was formed, Ambedkar had difficulty to get into it because all his lifetime's work was coming to a naught if he had not got into Constituent Assembly. And thereafter, the scheming took place, and he was, with the help of Congress, actually he got into Constituent Assembly. Not only that, but he was made chairman of an important committee, a drafting committee, which was tasked to actually draft India's constitution. Because of that, Ambedkar is called the chief architect of the Indian constitution. So these are some of the milestones. But Ambedkar's greatness lies, according to me, not in what he has done. He has done a lot to Dalit, done a lot to India, but his greatness lies in what he has not done. The kind of warnings he has kept before Indian people, that they are the kinds of things that we should be paying attention to, because this war against caste that he began actually still remains unwon. What were the challenges? When 26 January 1950, while handing over the constitution, he made a last speech in the Constituent Assembly saying that we face three challenges. Challenges in terms of something like we had a political democracy, he said, but unless the social and economic democracy is established soonest, the people of India would actually blast off this structure of political democracy. We see that the way India has gone thereafter, we see that the things have worsened to the extent beyond description. Indian people have not come to blast off the structure, but actually Indian democracy still actually remains limping and goes by. So such is the kind of illustrious life. I would now stop here and probably invite my co-panelist, Professor Alone. He is JNU, both are from JNU. They are professors in JNU and a lot of research and studies, etc. to their credit. So Professor Alone now.
Thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank Nilofer for inviting me. It came as a surprise. And well, I've been given a very less time, and Dr. Ambedkar had done such an enormous work to sum up all those things. It's very difficult, as Anand has said, but I'd like to put forth two parts, important points. One is that Ambedkar's exposure to Buddhism started when Dada Keruskar gave him a biography of Buddha, which he himself had written when he passed his matriculation examination. Then the second thing is that Ambedkar was the first person in modern India to present the critique of three dominant discourses of that time. One is imperial discourses, second is the Brahmanical discourses, and third is the Marxian discourses, or what he even called as socialist discourses. Then the third important aspect, the third important aspect is his declaration, which Anand has eloquently referred to, that he was born as a Hindu, but he did not die as a Hindu. And then came 1936 Annihilation of Caste, where he talks about the rules and principles. There he says that rules are practical, they are habitual ways of doing things according to prescription. But principles are intellectual, they are useful methods of judging things. Rules seek to tell an agent just what course of action to pursue. Principles do not prescribe a specific course of action. So he makes a beautiful distinction between what is rules and what is principle, and how the behavioral pattern, the thinking consciousness, and the kind of a behavioral consciousness which the Indian society nurture and very much adapt and follow, and how their consciousness is governed by the so-called rules and not by the principles, and how those rules are embedded in the sanction of the whole idea of sacredness, divinity, and the entire religious ethos of ignorance. Then comes very important statement in that annihilation of caste he makes. He says that nothing is sanatan, permanent, everything is changing. So he refers to the Buddhist logic of Pratita Samutta. And in 1955, when he delivers lectures at Kathmandu International Buddhist Conference, he further says that nothing is permanent, everything is changing, being is becoming. So one can understand his engagement with Buddhism not only at a philosophical level, but also equally at a pragmatic, rational, and at a social, political, and economic and intellectual level. Now, let me also tell you that prior to 1956, there have been incidents where he showed his leaning towards Buddhism very, very clear. He went to Dehu, established the image of Buddha. These are all prior to 1956. He goes to Agra. He establishes Buddha Vihar in Chakkipat area. This is all before 1956. He went to Pulgaon. He laid a foundation stone of the Buddha Vihar. He even conducted Buddha Jayanti programs through Scheduled Caste Federation before 1956. So his leaning towards Buddhism was very, very clear, and at the same time he demystified Buddha. Now, what Buddha was considered as only a person of compassion, ahimsa. So he contradicts that, and he goes further and says that Buddha is not just confined to compassion and ahimsa. What Buddhism talks about is all about the modern ethos of, say, liberty, equality, and fraternity. And these are the core principles of modernity, which he claims that he does not take from the French Revolution, rather he learns from his own Indian tradition of Buddhism. Now, he divides the Indian tradition into two camps. One is the Brahmanical tradition, another is a non-Brahmanical tradition. And Buddhism, being a non-Brahmanical tradition, which rejected the caste, which rejected the varna, which rejected the idea of divinity, which rejected the idea of soul, which rejected the idea of transmigration of the soul, which rejected the whole idea of punarjanma. So these are the kind of principles which he understands, and very important to transform the mind consciousness of the people of India, and also to take it as a tool in a modern democracy to fight against all kinds of injustices and all kinds of violations. By and large, what happens is that the whole problem of untouchability is a disease. He says that caste is a perversion of varna. But I would like to go further and say that caste is a psychotic perversion. And here is a living example that how caste is a psychotic perversion. Moreover, the disease of untouchability lies with the caste Hindus, but the medicine is being administered to the untouchables and not to the touchables, who are the actual practitioners of the caste society. Another important thing which one has to go and think beyond is that of the institution of the caste, the institution of the khap, the killings that take place in free modern India. Though we claim that we are a modern democracy, that though we claim that we have liberty, equality, fraternity, it is very easy to claim that yes, we believe in equality, but it is so difficult to practice equality. And the problem lies with, again, this whole idea of rule and principles. And that is where Ambedkarian interventions become important, because the consciousness with which the person behaves does not empower that citizen of this nation to have any kind of a power of self-introspection. Had the society been self-introspective, probably there would have been a change. probably there would have been a change in the entire attitude towards women, towards the people who are at the lower ebb of the society, and also to the shared nationalistic aspirations. These are the important ideas which are so much embedded in the entire discourse of Ambedkar, which he derives from Buddhism. When his book Buddha and his Dhamma was published, it was attacked, very enormous attacks were made on that book. And in his preface, he categorically writes that what are the problems in accepting the generic interpretations on Buddhism, or for that matter, the understanding of Buddha. And he deviates from that and puts Buddha as a very philosopher, as a rational human being, whose means are more dominant and more dominant, more rational, and useful for the rebuilding, reconstruction of the society, and change the society to a better society, to make it more self-responsive. And that is how the whole ethos of morality and ethicality becomes the cardinal principles of Buddhism, which the society is still lacking. There is no concept of morality and ethicality which goes in the functioning of the Indian society, and this becomes a biggest problem in order to make ourselves as one nation, or in order to make ourselves to believe in the idea of shared aspiration. So these are the important aspects with which Ambedkar works. And lastly, I would like to sum up by saying that, the intellectual class, Ambedkar distinguishes intellectual class and educated class. He says that the educated class are the ones who are self-centered, who are involved in the welfare of themselves. The intellectual class are the ones who are open to ideas, willing to change. And it is sad that we don't have intellectual class in India. It's sad that we have not evolved any kind of a intellectual class in India. It's sad that we have not evolved any kind of a rational means of understanding in our academic discourses, in our social behavior, in our caste practices. So the society is still living in a perennial ignorance, and this perennial ignorance can only be countered by advocating what the Buddha had talked about, what Buddha called as killing of ignorance, that is through prajna, that is through knowledge, and that is what Ambedkar believed. But the knowledge should be a rational one. And often philosophers would say that rationality is always relative. But I would like to go and further say, yes, rationality is always relative. Its relativeness depends on its objective. If the objective of the rationality is to ward off ignorances, it becomes righteous rationality. And if the objective of the rationality is to conceal the ignorances, not to kill the ignorances, it becomes unrighteous rationality, and therefore it becomes protected ignorance. Thank you.
Now I would invite Badri Narayan, Professor Badri Narayan. He has a lot of work on Dalit movement in Uttar Pradesh, and he would speak about that and brief for next 10 minutes, and we'll have some questions and answers.
Thank you, Anand. I'm very thankful to the organizers for inviting me to share some of my research experiences or some of my thoughts on Ambedkar. There are two ways to see the Ambedkar. One way our friends has already applied. What Ambedkar as real, what was Ambedkar, and what he did, what was his discourse. There is another way to see the relevance of Ambedkar, why we need Ambedkar, why we are going to discuss Ambedkar here. So everyone needs Ambedkar nowadays. It's also, there are crossing the barriers. Not only Ambedkar ideology crossed the barrier, but time also crossed the barrier. like Ambedkar, who never won election, any bigger election, public election, now he become a symbol that everyone wants to use Ambedkar to get elected in the electoral politics. So second thing, Ambedkar always was against of any kind of appropriation. He was for very much ethical politics. But now he is being appropriated by the political parties, political forces, for political ends. Thirdly, Ambedkar is being used by the marginalized to become in power, and by the powerful to control the others, to maintain the power. So these are the contradictions, and I would like to talk on these contradictions and then see how Ambedkar never did popular politics in Uttar Pradesh. Ambedkar born in Maharashtra, but his politics or his ideas got a kind of shape in Uttar Pradesh. The first Dalit lead party came in the power in Uttar Pradesh. So how he traveled, how his ideas disseminated in the Hinduism in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, I would also like to reflect on that. Ambedkar, there is another contradiction that everyone wants Ambedkar and everyone has its own Ambedkar, like Apne Ram, like saffron Ambedkar, like blue Ambedkar, like red Ambedkar. No, everyone has its own Ambedkar, and everyone try to reuse Ambedkar ideas in a very selective manner for doing their own politics. So that's another kind of contradiction which lies with the Ambedkar image and the symbol. And I also always tell that Ambedkar image is very vulnerable image nowadays. Everyone is able to appropriate that, or everyone wants to appropriate that. So that's another problem which lies with the symbol of Ambedkar. As we know that Ambedkar ideas, as our friend discussed, is very critical ideas. The ideas which has its own teeth, इसके अपने दांत हैं. अगर कोई swallow करेगा तो पेट फाड़ के निकल आएगा. If you don't have appetite to swallow that image, you can't succeed in swallowing that. So I'm saying that there are various forces, those who are trying to appropriate Ambedkar image. So two kind of politics I would like to discuss, how they are trying to appropriate Ambedkar image. One appropriation for giving power to the marginalized, and other appropriation for maintaining control the power. The marginalized, Ambedkar, as I said, Ambedkar never did politics in Uttar Pradesh, but you can find a lot of statues in Uttar Pradesh. In every village, at least the bigger bastis of Dalit, you can find the Ambedkar statues. More than 60,000 statues, every village you can find the Ambedkar statues, made by people, made by villagers, supported by the BSP MLAs supporters. Mayawati, when they formed their party, Kamsi Ram and Mayawati, they requested their party MLAs that you devote certain amount of your fund to make a statue of Ambedkar in villages. And that's why you can find lots of statues in villages. And those statues are not only statues. You can find a lot of rituals takes place there, like pujas, like jayantis, like lots of songs around Ambedkar. You can find lots of the orchestras formed by Dalit groups. They perform songs of Ambedkar in villages. And those songs are formed on the basis of folk songs, folk tunes, like grinding songs. The women who grinds the grains, they did a special song for that. In those songs, the song of Shohar, the birth of the children. So they formed a lot of songs around Ambedkar image, and they disseminate Ambedkar memories to the people. I'm telling you how Ambedkar became popular in Uttar Pradesh. Outlook survey recently top 10 great men of India. And you know who was on the top? Ambedkar. Earlier Ambedkar was not on the top. And Nehru was on third. So that's also a very interesting shift. And this shift happened because, most of the entries came from Uttar Pradesh, not from Maharashtra. Most of the entries came from Uttar Pradesh because Uttar Pradesh produced a kind of educated class among Dalits, and they are responding to the call. If someone asks who is the great man of India, they are sending their messages, their emails, or their letters or whatever about for the Ambedkar. And the another feature of Ambedkar images, image is multi-sided image. Multiple forms, it contains multiple forms. It's not monolithic like the image of Nehru, because no one is able to use the Nehru image, though other party can use. But Ambedkar image has a space. You can negotiate with the Ambedkar image, and you can reinterpret Ambedkar image in your own ways. That shows that the kind of variety of writing, the multiplicity of the writing, multiplicity of the thought he has produced during his lifetime. So Ambedkar, the second is the songs, through popular songs, through folk songs. Ambedkar became popular in UP villages and UP society. And third is popular booklets, chapbooks, Hanuman Chalisa. You have already, you see Hanuman Chalisa. You can find lot of Bhim Chalisa in the form of Hanuman Chalisa, the similar, a smaller booklet form, and they are being sold in the Mela Khelaj rally, and people come and buy those Hanuman Chalisa of 25 paisa or 30 paisa or 8 Khana, and they used to read those Chalisas, and they remember Ambedkar. Then this whole UP produced more than thousands of popular writers like that. Those who write on Ambedkar ideology, those who write on Dalit movement, and they produce. And our book, we organize the KSLITFEST to give prominence to our books, but they don't need any KSLITFEST. They one book, 20 edition or 30 edition, one edition of 20,000, more than 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs books they sell in 4 or 5 years. So tremendous kind of literature they produced, and through that Ambedkar image became popular in the Hindi region and Hindi Patti and in Uttar Pradesh. So Ambedkar, the image traveled, and the Ambedkar, everyone, if you see the statue, you can find in one statue Ambedkar wears black coat. In another statue Ambedkar wears a red coat. In third statue Ambedkar wears blue coat. In some statues he has a hair like this. In some statue he has like different way. In some statues he has chashma. In some statues he has no chashma. So everyone has shown Ambedkar, imagining Ambedkar. And I am saying that this imagining Ambedkar is more powerful than the fixed Ambedkar. I am saying that this power of imagining of the people, in fact, the power which gives popularity to the Ambedkar image. If you will take out this power of imagining from the people, then Ambedkar image will be come down. I'll tell you a story how it happened. When Mayawati, the BSP and Mayawati in the first or second, BSP and Mayawati, in first and second phase, they provided a space for the common people to remember Ambedkar, to reimagine Ambedkar in their own way. So they gave freedom to make statues. They supported their politics. They supported their statue making by funding, by money, going there and getting statues and all. But lot of contestations and the conflict started around Ambedkar images in UP villages. So someone comes and puts Ambedkar image somewhere, and the other party comes and they push out the Ambedkar image, Ambedkar statue from there. So lot of struggle, conflicts started taking place on Ambedkar image. So Mayawati, what she did, she ordered that now no one can make Ambedkar statues in UP. Only we can make, means a state can make. And only a state can make the statue because of its violence going in society. And then she made this huge statues of Ambedkar in Lucknow and in different parts in capital. So I say that because this is one of the big, this is a very wrong decision which Mayawati proposed that time, because that derived the power of imagination from the hand of people, from the mind of people. From that geo, she tried to say only a state has right to imagine Dalit estate or Bahujan estate, not people and not public. But the Ambedkar, meaning of Ambedkar lies in the imagining of the people. If they will not imagine, the meaning, the power of Ambedkar will die. So I think my time is over, and here I am concluding my remarks. And thank you so much for listening. Thanks.
As I said, it has been just a token homage to Ambedkar at his 125th birthday. It's not, it can't be dealt with within 7, 8, 10 minutes like that. So time is up for the session as such, but if you have very serious questions, about a couple of them could be taken. Yeah.
Just have a small, can you hear me? Just have a small
comment and a question. Yesterday we had a session on 1962 war, and all throughout the session everybody referred to Jawaharlal Nehru as Panditji, Panditji. And today we're talking about Dr. Ambedkar. Very few people have mentioned Doctor his name. Knowing the background of these two gentlemen, and I was also made to understand that Jawaharlal Nehru was only a gentleman passer. I'm not sure whether it's true or not. My specific question is, was Ambedkar his real name or was it an adopted name?
The story goes like his Brahmin teacher, when he was in Satara, his name was Ambedkar. He had taken a fancy with him, and his real name was actually coming from his real name, the family name was Sakpal. But he was coming from the village called Ambadway. People in books etc. would find it misspelled, Ambade and all that, but it was Ambadway. So in Satara, his name was Ambadwaykar. So the Brahmin teacher said that this is a bit tongue twisting, so he adopted his name. He has given his name. Okay. As per your doctor etc., Ambedkar is much above doctors, so there is no need of actually embellishing with a doctor as such every time. Okay, Ambedkar stands much bigger than any kinds of things. You can think of when he was in Columbia, just he finished his doctorate within 1 year. Okay, and and he had taken for his MS subject about 40% more credits than were required. So that was the first knowledge when he landed up in Columbia. And after doctorate degree, he actually comes back to London School of Economics and enrolls himself as a graduate student. Again, simultaneously goes to Bonn and enrolled in the Bonn University also. So there is no comparison. Ambedkar is the first doctor, DSc from London University. Actually, so you can imagine the kind of scholarship and zeal with which, actually he did not have any kind of background, a scholastic background also. When he actually was passed the school exams and thereafter went to BA and all that, it was a very modest performance in academically, but he thrilled his own professors there in Columbia as well as in London School of Economics. That was the thing. So,
a question for Badrinath.
Oh, sorry. I just two small questions. One is that there are about, I think, 70 million Dalits in the country. How come the ones who converted to Buddhism are so few? I think there are about
8 million.
8 million. So how come the other of the 70 million, how come they didn't convert to Buddhism? And my second question is, it's believed that Dr. Ambedkar seriously thought to ask his followers to convert to Sikhism. Is that true or not? That there was a serious attempt that convert to Sikhism?
Yes. Actually, just after Mahasatyagraha that I referred to briefly, he started giving a call of conversion, renouncing Hinduism and conversion. And he directly gave a call to become Muslim. Okay? In response to his call, actually 20 people those days had converted Muslim, they still remained Muslims. Thereafter 1930, when he taken a vow that I will, although I was born Hindu, I would never die a Hindu. And thereafter it created a turbulence of sorts. All kinds of religious sides, this side started approaching Ambedkar, Christians and Muslims and Sikhism.
So Sikhs actually gave him all that kind of blank check-like thing. So Ambedkar suggested to open a college for Dalits, okay? And a Khalsa college in Bombay was started like. So this was the concrete offer, and thereafter Ambedkar sent a team of people to study Sikhism to Amritsar. That included his own son. So there was a serious kind of consideration of Sikhism that Ambedkar had given, but ultimately this remained. Actually, Buddhism was not in sight at all. In 1936, Buddhism, he starts his lecture explaining things like starts with an atrocity. Why you are beaten? Because you are weak people. And what is the solution? That you have to overcome your weakness by merging into some existing religious community. So only 2-3 religious communities existed those days, and Buddhism was not there. But ultimately, he landed up embracing Buddhism. Coming to your first question, why people have not taken Buddhism, out of 170 million, only 8 million, according to census, are Buddhists. So there were hurdles earlier because of these reservation things, etc. When 1990 it was clear that there was sudden spurt, and this is a post-spurt figure, 8 million. But positive signs are there that everywhere people are actually converting them in thoughts. In Gujarat now, the Una agitation, etc. is there. You must be reading in paper that many people are daily converting to Buddhism. So, but that was not a Baba Sahib dream. Baba Sahib Ambedkar actually thought that I would make entire India as a Buddhist. Only then only the solution to this caste virus, etc. could come. But that is still a far-off dream. It's like years away.
Question for Badrina.
I have a question, please.
Yeah, can I just ask you?
Yeah.
Badri, you highlighted the problem very well in terms of appropriation. Now that begs the next question, that who do you think rightfully owns, or where is the ownership of Baba Ambedkar? Who owns Baba Ambedkar? And a follow-up question is, what is wrong with the development of Ambedkar as a kind of a pop icon? Is there something wrong with that?
It's a very good question. Actually, who owned who is the right force, the right power to own the Ambedkar? I think those who are in power, those who are disempowered, those who are marginalized, those who are struggling for the getting better life, not those people or those power, those who are trying to control people, those who are trying to control power. So Ambedkar is useful image for the struggle of this empowerment of the marginal communities. Ambedkar only helped to that stage. If you want to use Ambedkar after that, you are misusing, and there you are losing your battle, because Ambedkar is not going to help you to create a kind of hegemonic power or power who can suppress others. Because Ambedkar was an image for which emerged for empowering marginalized, and that appetite is only for the politics who can work for the marginals. That is very clear, and it's not a problem for Ambedkar. Anyone can use Ambedkar, but the issue is whether your appetite is for that or not. If it's not for that, you will lose it. The way one party is going to lose. I'm not going to take the name of that party. They just started. They are doing everything to use Ambedkar, but every day they are losing. So Ambedkar एक तरह से हाथ से छलक जाने वाला है ना, वो आपको नहीं पकड़ के रख सकते.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anand. We need to round it up. Maybe your last words, maybe, sir?
The last question from me, please. Thank you.
No last
No, we are way beyond. We are way beyond our schedule, sir.
Just give me a choice, please. In this morning's Tribune, there's a story on Ambedkar. Highlighting it is a village in UP. In that village, a Dalit may not bicycle down a street where Brahmins live. If they walk, they have to carry their chappals on their head. Do you think it is possible that this virus can be swept out of the Indian mind? Thank you.
Very good question, but we do not have time to discuss even. I think I should thank you. Just remember, Ambedkar is the biggest icon of past. His idea, the kind of Ambedkar is shown up to you, is actually antithetical to what real Ambedkar stood for. And thank you for your audience and taunting me repeatedly. So we'll end it here. Thank you.
I'm sorry for that, but we are way beyond time. Maybe education is the way we could remove, all these thoughts from the mind that he's talking about. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Variety of education that JNU offers. And we're all very, 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 very honored and proud. Personally, I am. That's my favorite campus, ladies and gentlemen. 2 professors, Badri, thank you very much. Lone Sab, thank you very much. And Dr. Anand, thank you very much. We also crossed the barriers of being educated and being intellectual. That's very interesting. If you would like to know more, go to JNU. Our next session, after which we'll take a break for tea. So let this attention continue, ladies and gentlemen. Very honored to invite on stage Malvika Sangvi. Wherever you are, if you could kindly come up on stage. And Arundhati Subramaniam. As they take on stage, I'll give a very brief introduction. Arundhati Subramaniam, wherever you are, if you can hear me out, could you come on stage, please? There they are. Let me introduce them, ladies and gentlemen. Malvika Sangvi obviously needs no introduction. More than, I think, 3 decades of tremendous experience in all spaces of the media, especially the audiovisual and the print. All over the world, she's there, and we have been following her writings in columns and, of course, her television indulgences. Malvika Sangvi shall be moderating and being one of the lead speakers here as well. Ma'am, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the only Malvika Sangvi. And of course, I would like to just mention a few lines about this wonderful lady. Immense amount of credibility here. I saw her yesterday in the evening when Jassi was performing. Didn't know that she is of that laurel. She is described as one of the finest poets writing in India today. That's the Hindu. And we take Hindu very seriously in the country. When God is a traveler, that's what the discussion is all about. Journeys, mundane and magical. She has won various prizes, very credible awards. That also includes the Khushwant Singh Memorial Prize for Poetry. The Book of Buddha, Sadhguru More Than Alive. She's been an editor, and I need not say more. Arundhati Subramaniam. So over to you, Malvika, and this is going to be a very interesting session on not only the book but also poetry. Please do pay us your attention. Thank you very much. All yours, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a lovely, sunny, late morning this is. I am delighted to be here to introduce one of my favorite poets. I've been reading her. I've heard her on a couple of occasions, and she is absolutely one of the finest voices that we have in this country today. And I think this festival is so much the better to have Arundhati Subramaniam with us. I hope to persuade her to read, and she not only reads, she performs her poetry, and it's just such a sublime experience. I believe that we have wars so that we have peace to enjoy things like poetry. And it's wonderful that we have this atmosphere today, and I'm going to ask Arundhati to begin. Would you like me to read a little introduction about her first? I mean, she's won a lot of awards and stuff, so let me get this. a little black button here, I'm told, which, okay. Before Arundhati reads, I would like her to, why don't you read first, and then I will get into the poetry. Read a poem of yours. If you could read that wonderful one that you've written about Bombay, because that resonates a lot with me. I will never forget the sentence, the couplet, a city of garrulous sewers and tight-lipped tongues, tight-lipped taps. Yes, go ahead. Does this mic work? It does? No. Yes? All right. Okay. Thank you, Malavika. It's good to be here, and sometimes the best way to acknowledge where we are is in fact to invoke another place, which is at such marked variance with where one is right now. This is my Bombay poem, and Bombay, like we all know, is a city that evokes extreme responses. I love it. I love to hate it. It's a city I've spent all my life trying to escape from. And now that I'm actually out of there a good deal of the time, I spend a lot of my time being nostalgic about it, where I live. Where I live. I live on a wedge of land, reclaimed from a tired ocean, somewhere at the edge of the universe. Greetings from this city of L'Oreal sunsets and diesel afternoons, deciduous with concrete, Botoxed with vanity. City of septic magenta hair clips, of garrulous sewers and tight-lipped taps, of 80s film tunes buzzing near the left temple, of ranting TV soaps and monsoon melodramas. City racked by hope and bulimia. City uncontained by movie screen and epigram. City condemned to unspool in an eternal hysteria of lurid nylon dream. City where you can drop off a swollen local and never be noticed. City where you're a part at every imli-soaked bhelpuri. City of the Mahalakshmi beggar peering up through a gorse bush of splayed limbs. City of dark alleys. City of mistrust. City of forsaken, tube-lit rooms. City that coats the lungs, stiffens the spine, chills the gut with memory. City suspended between flesh and mortar and full leather and delirium, where it is perfectly historical to be looking out on a sooty handkerchief of ocean, searching for God. Thank you. That was absolutely fabulous. Okay, so I've got a quick biography of, of Arundhati is an award-winning poet and writer on spirituality and culture, winner of the inaugural Khushwant Singh Memorial Prize for Poetry in January 2015, the Raza Award for Poetry, and the International Piero Biognalari, how do you say that? Okay. She is the author of 4 works of poetry, 2 works of prose, and an editor of several anthologies on poetry and spirituality. Widely translated and anthologized, her most recent book of poems, When God is a Traveler, was published in 2014 and is available at the bookshop. I'd urge all of you to pick it up. It was shortlisted for the prestigious T.S. Eliot Prize As prose writer, she is the author of the Book of Buddha, which has been it's been republished a lot, and the best-selling biography of a contemporary mystic, Sadhguru, More Than a Life. Okay, Arundhati, I'm going to ask you that tired old question about poetry and its relevance. You've written very illuminatingly about it. Why is poetry to most people so scary? The poem you just read was so immediate and so accessible. Why doesn't poetry play a bigger existence in our lives?
I'm sure we all have theories about that. It always amazes me, Malavika, that I think we'd all agree there's no one here who hasn't written a poem. No one can cross the age of 16 without having written a poem. And sometimes it's written in blood. The emotional thermostat requires poetry. You cannot cross your teens without writing a poem. But the odd thing is that we all write poems at some point or the other, but we don't necessarily go on to read them. Not all of us have written stories, but we all believe on some level that we need to graduate to the adult form, which is prose or fiction. And poetry somewhere gets left behind. I think, and maybe we can talk about this more informally later, I actually believe that the way in which poetry is often taught in schools has a great deal to do with it. I think we're all grateful to several enlightened teachers, but I think almost each one of us has known a particular kind of question that is asked in a classroom, which to my mind really marks the death knell.
Can I guess what that question is?
It's not difficult, is it? What is the poet trying to say? Right? I think with that question, what is the poet trying to say? Never just what is the poet saying. I think that really marks the beginning of the divide in our heads between our spontaneous ability to respond to a poem, and I think we all have that, between that and this sort of tiresome sense that one has to be clever in order to be able to understand a poem. Each of us has known that we are capable of recognizing a poem even before we understand it. I think that's how we all grew up responding to poetry. I remember my own earliest encounters with poetry as a child, when a lot of language was just incomprehensible to me, so there were just fragmentary glimpses of meaning. But there was this tremendous sense of excitement at just being around kinetic language. And meaning was almost secondary. That ability to respond to poetry is the ability to respond to language as verbal choreography. The ability to respond to language because it's dangerous, it's unpredictable, it's language that doesn't obey the laws of gravity the way prose does, it's language that doesn't join the dots. I think we all have the ability to respond to that, we just forget. And we're encouraged.
What you'd once said, Arundhati, is that the form, the juice of a poem, its sensuous heart center, is cast aside as mere husk, superfluous, forgettable. I think the burden of having to mean something has, as you said, taken the juice out of poetry. Would that be the sensuousness, the immediate appeal, as you had felt when you discovered T.S. Eliot? Why don't you talk about that as a child, how you came to poetry?
Well, as I said, I came to poetry a long time before I discovered Eliot, but you're absolutely right. I did read Eliot at the age of 12 or 13 without having a clue who this was, whether this was a man or a woman, whether this was a significant poet or an insignificant one. I just remember pulling down this book in my grandfather's home in Madras and beginning to read, and just feeling this exultant sense of homecoming. I think that's what it was. Not because I understood, and I'm not sure I still understand. Not because I understood, but because I recognized. I recognized that this was the place I wanted to be, where life wasn't just about meaning, I think far too often the kind of question, what is the poet trying to say, encourages us to believe that life is just about meaning, that a poem is just about decoding what's on the page. And the implicit assumption is that the poet is unable to just say what he or she means. She can only grunt out these little pellets of, this little fragmented utterance that you in your superior wisdom as a student then decode and render in elegant flowing prose paragraphs. The point is, I realized when I first discovered Eliot, that I wanted to be in a place where there was mystery as well as illumination, a place of clarity, but also a place of darkness, which I think we're all actually quite comfortable with.
You once said, what's overlooked is the sheer joy of poetry as sound. And that's what most appeals to me about your poetry, is that it works on the page and it works so well heard. So, can we have another poem, please?
It's always difficult to know what to read and at what point. Since we're talking about the new book, the poem I'd like to read is about another place. It's a place that evokes just as extreme responses as Bombay does, Banaras. I first went there in 2009, and I was fascinated, and I also felt this tremendous sense of recoil, which I think is perhaps not unfamiliar to people who go there. There's an epigraph to this poem, and it's an epigraph drawn from a sign that I found on Kedar Ghat, which went, Moonlight English Coaching Center, O label to standard label, spelled L-E-B-A-L, clearly intended to be level. And I just found that charming, and I took a photograph of it at the time, and I didn't quite know that it would end up as a poem. Banaras. Moonlight English Coaching Center, O label to standard label. Label 1. There shall be no collisions as long as every cow sports 5 heads, 12 legs, 8 wheels, 10 bicycle bells, and 1 moo. Label 2. This Pandit with the cheddar cheese voice has scratched his tummy as long as that dog has dreamt of transmigration. Label 3. No board exams here. The living are coached on dying, the dead on rebirthing, the priests on parody. Manikarnika blazes in an endless semi-final. Label 4. Pizza Hut is just 1,000 years old. Label 5. Each time he spits, he unleashes a torrent of juice, snot, stomach enzymes, and a Veda. Incredible India, you say. The universe in a globule of pan, profligate with mucus and metaphysics, sparing only with our semen. Label 6. Paul arrives from Kerala with brandy, returns with Gangajal. His sadhu friend and guide is ex-Naxalite. Label 7. Manya calls. She asks where I am. I am blank. Before me, the hotel wallpaper, a palm-fringed sea, has turned grey with the effluence of those that have lain here before me, contemplating death and room service. It's not over yet. That evening, label 8, we hunt, we thirst, we ache, desperate pilgrims, fevered seekers. for just 1 millimeter of riverbank that we can call God-forsaken. Lovely.
And yet, Orton says, poetry makes nothing happen. And I think we bring, it brings us back to what does it do then? Obviously, when you read out, you could see the enjoyment, the delight, people hanging on to every word. But of course, it doesn't make anything happen. What would you say about that?
The line that I'm particularly fond of quoting, Malavika, is one that I discovered. It's by an anonymous source. It says that writing a poem is a bit like dropping a petal down the Grand Canyon and waiting for an echo. It's as absurd as that, really. And yet echoes happen. I think we know that. They're subtle echoes, but they happen. And that in some way makes it worthwhile, the fact that it is an imperceptible echo, but it happens. Poetry doesn't change a thing, I think we all know that. But it's at the end of a poem that I think any one of us, I think we can all think of a poem that has mattered in some way to us. And I think we know that at the end of reading a poem of that kind, in some way, we are different. We may not be able to quantify that difference, we may not be able to measure it, but there is some discernible change in one's pH value, I think. We're either more acidic or more alkaline, but something has changed in our chemistry at the end of reading a poem that we love.
Lovely. Which brings me to the question I've so long wanted to ask you. I've always admired your poetry. You're an intelligent poet. I get immediately what you're saying. You're the last person I'd imagine who'd take off and go and live in an ashram. You told me that the process was a slow one. How does it work there? Is it better for your poetry? Are you in a zone and on a dimension that feeds more of your poetry writing abilities? What made you do that?
Actually, the complete answer to that question is probably to be found in the biography to the Sadhguru book,
which is also available.
Which is a fairly substantial introduction about where the poetry met a sense of quest. I never thought I would have a guru. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would be in an ashram. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool urban creature, and I thought that's where I'd remain. But one way of putting it, since we are talking about poetry today, is the fact that I began to realize that poetry is not just about words. Poetry is also the only verbal art there is, and this is what makes it a dark art. It's the only verbal art there is that consciously embraces gaps. It consciously embraces silences.
Music does that too, no?
Yes. All those blank spaces on a page of poetry mean music. Music too, as an oral form. True. Poetry particularly as verbal. You know, the lyric poem, certainly, which can be set to music. The idea that one can embrace these pauses in a certain way, I realize is what makes poetry dangerous as well. And if you don't make your peace with those pauses, I think it's possible to get derailed by them. So yes, that's what happened to me. I kind of fell headlong into one of those blank spaces on a page of poetry and discovered that there were vast areas of myself that I couldn't signpost in language. And a journey began after that, and then the guru happened, and I realized that all my misgivings about gurus were essentially about allowing some kind of paternalistic, authoritarian figure into one's life. and took me time to realize it didn't have to be so at all. That in fact, this is a journey that is about allowing oneself time for those silences, but also allowing into one's life a figure who is far more committed to one's freedom. I certainly believe that's true. This is a guru who's far more committed to my freedom than I am myself. And I believe that's true of any authentic guru. Unfortunately, the word is so overloaded and so misused that it's difficult for us to reclaim the voltage of its original meaning.
What you've explained is absolutely clear, but have you written a poem about this, and would you read it out? About exactly what you've said? Or something about seeking this guru and finding him and what happened during the process?
Actually not, Madhumika. I think what's been important to me about the journey is how it's influenced the how of my poetry, not the what. So it's not like the content has changed dramatically, but I think the poems have become more perforated. The poems have become more porous. I think that's changed. But let me see if I can find a poem to read. Which is not entirely about the quest, but is certainly about the notion of finding, this is about a personal God, the notion of an Ishtadevta, which has always been, it's fascinated me, the idea of a personal God. I wasn't even sure what it meant, and I'm not sure I do now. But what I do know is that it's possible to celebrate, particularly in this subcontinent, the idea of 33 million at last count, gods and goddesses, that one can pick one out that's most suited to one's taste and to one's temperament. And if you don't like them, you can invent one of your own. And if you don't want any of them, you can toss them out altogether and still be on a spiritual journey. I was trying to explain this to a friend of mine, and when I couldn't quite get through, I ended up writing a poem. How some Hindus find their personal gods. It's about learning to trust the tug that draws you to some shadowed alcove, undisturbed by footfall or butter lamps. A blue-dark coolness where you find him waiting patiently. That perfect minor deity. Shy, crumbly, oven fresh, just a little wry, content to play a cameo in everyone's life, but your own. A God who looks like he could understand errors in translation, blizzards on the screen, gaps in memory, lapses in attention. Who might even learn by rote the fury, the wheeze, the pali, the pigeon, the gnashing mixer grinder, the awkward Remington stutter of your heart, who could make them his own. After that, you can settle for none other.
I want to ask you questions about the process of actually writing a poem, because I think people would love to know, how do you know when you've written a poem? How do you know when it's complete? What do you do with it then? Who do you show it to? Is there a kind of committee you submit it to and it finally gets the approval that it is a poem? What happens? I mean, what is your process of writing?
I think my process is to pretend I've never written it, to write it and put it away somewhere where I can't see it for a very long time.
How long is that time?
It could vary from 6 months to a year, or even longer. And then when I go back, I like to rediscover it almost as if it was someone else's poem. And then if it actually strikes me in some way as real, I'm likely to hang on to it. And even then, it could just be a fragment that then works itself into another poem.
And do you work at it every day? I mean, is it just inspired, or is there a time in the day that you actually sit and work on poetry?
No, I don't. But I hang around poems. I think the way I work best, the way I learn best, is just hanging around. I just hang around poems, I hang around things I like to do. I just sort of marinate a bit. I might just read, spend a whole day reading, several days reading, and then see where that goes.
You once said that poetry is got through contagion. What was that sentence? I've got it here.
No, it's actually a line, if that's the one I think you mean. It's a line from an anthology.
Poetry transforms you not through conviction, but through contagion. What was that?
It's a kind of infection, isn't it?
A disease.
It's not, it is a bit of a disease. As in, a poem is not trying to convert you. A poem is not trying to offer you a conclusion. A poem is a place where it's absolutely okay not to know. Someone asked me just yesterday, you have a book called When God is a Traveler. Does that mean you believe in God? And I said, the lovely thing about being a poet is I don't have to believe. It's a place where you can be uncertain. It's a place where you can be exploratory. It's a place where you can wonder. And I think that wonder sometimes can be contagious. I think that wonder can remind us of a place within ourselves that is capable of recognizing enchantment of some kind. I think that's how the poem works. And I just want to, at this point, if possible, Malavika, if we are drawing to the close, I think we are. Okay. I would
one more poem,
okay.
then, please. One more poem, yeah.
Is that allowed?
Please, yes.
I'd actually, if possible, like to read a poem that's not my own. I'd like to read a poem from an anthology that I edited very recently, which is a book of bhakti poetry called Eating God. It's an anthology of bhakti poetry down the ages, starting with the Tamil poets of the 6th and 8th centuries, Nammalvar and the Vaishnava and the Shaiva poets, and then mapping bhakti as it moved in its sagun and nirgun manifestations all over the subcontinent. When I'm in the north, I think it makes sense to read a poem by a southern mystic, so I'd just like to share that with you. This is a poem by a 15th century Telugu mystic, Annamacharya. Have you heard of him? You've read him? Have any of you read him? Okay. Annamacharya lived close to Tirupati, and for him, his personal god, his Ishtadevta, was Lord Venkatesha of Tirupati. And he writes several poems to Lord Venkatesha, beautiful padams meant to be sung. Some of those poems are written as a male seeker, and those are anguished, tormented, guilt-ridden poems. Some of those poems are written as a female seeker, and those are very different. I'd like to read one of Annamacharya's poems in the female voice. The only thing I'd like to say here is that this is a bhakta, a devotee, but this is not any old devotee. This is the goddess herself. This is the goddess Alamelu Manga talking to Lord Venkatesha. And she's a particularly provocative, confident, playful, sensual goddess. Okay? So when you get closer to the bedroom, which is where a lot of this interaction between god and goddess occurs, you realize that the power equations are in such a state of flux that you don't really know who the boss is and who the slave. You don't know who the god is and who the bhakta. This is the goddess speaking. He's the master. What can I say when he says I'm better than the others? I don't even have to ask. He takes whatever I say as a command. Why should I brag? My husband is under my thumb. He's the master. Who am I to serve him when he takes joy in serving me? How can I tell you the 1,000 ways he's with me? He knows everything, just like God. And He praises me. He's the master. I'm always in His arms. He's always laughing with me. He's the God on the hill. And I'm Alamelu Manga. Do I have to make a statement? He's my slave. He's the master.
I think we don't, some questions, yes, we love some questions. So many.
The rest could be personal discourses with the poet. But we can take two questions. We are way beyond time, but obviously none of us would like to come in between such sessions.
I'll start off.
Two questions, that's it.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about one person who is, I think, a poet and who has changed things. And he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Bob Dylan.
In Punjab, they say it's Bob Dylan. He's just won the Nobel laureate.
So, and he's been compared to, I read in the newspaper, Rabindranath Tagore, another poet. So I'd like your views on Bob Dylan and Rabindranath Tagore.
Rahul, could I opt out of this one? Could I? Not because I don't care for them. In different ways I have. I'm still trying to process the Bob Dylan thing for myself. Bob Dylan has been very important to me at a point in my life. And I think the impact of Bob Dylan is undeniable. It's just bringing them both into the same, at this point for me, to bring them both into the same conversation is something I'm not sure I'm capable of, but I think I might be capable of bringing them into a poem.
We look forward to that.
Malik.
A very quick observation and a question. William Butler Yeats, a very famous English poet, and this resonates with what you said, finished writing Sailing to Byzantium, and one critic went up to him and said, "Mr. Yeats, what are you trying to say in this poem?" Yeats said, "When I wrote the poem, God and I knew the meaning, but now God alone knows the meaning." And the question is, why was your poem on Bombay so pessimistic?
Was it?
I thought so. The imagery was quite.
It's a gritty poem. Honestly, I don't think I'm capable of writing a poem on Bombay particularly that is not in some way an edgy poem and a poem without dark overtones of some kind. I think the people and the places with which we have the most intimate relationship are those that we can often be very critical about. So it's in fact a relationship of love that produces that kind of darkness as well.
Actually, I found a lot of affection in that poem. I didn't see the darkness. I thought it was an affectionate poem to Bombay. True.
I'm so sorry. We will not be. We are way beyond time. There are 5 more presentations.
I just want to say this
After
was
tea.
literature at its best this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for the first time in the past 2 days, this is poetry. I mean, very, very different. It was missing in the past 2 days. Thank you very much. And credibility to Malvika. You know, moderating this session requires a lot of skill. I mean, Anilji, you would agree with me. It requires a lot of skill to moderate poetry sessions. To Malvika Sanghi, ladies and
Anil
gentlemen.
had a little shut eye, I noticed, right in front. You dozed off, right?
No, he was listening very intently.
Oh, he was closing his eyes
we know.
in appreciation. And your ears open. Absolutely.
But I just want to say thank you, Malik. Thank you for setting the tenor of things, and thank you for the sensitivity of your question. Thank you. Thank you.
And Arundhati, just one sentence, keep on writing and inspiring new generations. There are a lot of poets in India who are upcoming. To inspire them, they need a direction, so probably you could give it. Ladies and gentlemen, we break for tea. 20 minutes, if you could come back. There are 5 more sessions and outstanding sessions, each unique. So requesting you to come back in about 15 minutes, maybe we'll start in 20 minutes. Thank you very much.